Well, hey everyone, it's Single T here. I hope you guys are having a good Saturday. And I'm bringing you guys the last Devo in this week's series that's titled 5 Ways to Deal with Difficult People. And the one that I'm presenting today is, at least in my opinion, it's the most convicting one. And it's this: to give others grace just as God gave us grace. Follow with me here in Colossians chapter 3. I'm going to begin in verse 12, but the verse I'm going to focus on today is verse 13. It says this in verse 12: "Therefore, as the elect of God, holy and beloved, put on tender mercies, kindness, humility, meekness, long-suffering, bearing with one another and forgiving one another, if anyone has a complaint against another. Even as Christ forgave you, so you also must do." You know, this verse here in Colossians 3, verse 13, it reminds me how Jesus told disciples to pray in his famous Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 6. He says, "Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors." That's one of the components of prayer that Jesus gives to his disciples as an example in Matthew chapter 6. Now, when he says debt there, that word debt is another way of saying sin. And so when we think about forgiving others of our debts, as we ask God to forgive us of our debts, it makes me think that the debts of others, the sins of others that we are being told to forgive them, they pale in comparison to the crippling debt and weight and sin that we've committed against God and against Jesus. Because you see, Christ has forgiven us on the cross, not just for the sins that we've committed in the past, but the sins that we're still committing every day and the sins that you and I are going to continue to commit in the future. I mean, if this book that I'm holding here, if this Bible in my hand just represented one sin or one debt that I had against Christ, then this room and honestly probably the entire church would easily be filled to the brim with all of the sins that I've committed and that you have committed against God. And so we see that when we think about the sins and the debt that we have against Christ and how so much bigger and how much more crippling that weight is compared to the sins that may seem that are paltry in comparison that we hold against our enemies or our brothers and sisters in Christ. And you see in this verse here in Colossians 3, verse 13, it says that we are to bear with one another, meaning that we are to hold back any sort of judgment or revenge or hatred against them. But it doesn't just stop there. Not only are we to hold back those evil hatred thoughts and actions, but we are also to forgive one another, just like Christ forgave us. Because you guys see, without forgiveness from Christ, there is no cross. There is no salvation. There is no way for us to spend eternity with God if Christ didn't forgive us for what we've done, for all the sins and transgressions that we've committed. And so when we fully comprehend the magnitude of what Christ did on the cross for us, and if we are to be living like Jesus, if we're going to be more conformed, if our goal is to be more conformed to the image of Christ, when we reflect on what Christ did for us, that means that we should be even more generous with our forgiveness towards others. And this isn't just a suggestion. You also see here in this verse that it says at the end, "Even as Christ forgave you, so you also must do." It's not something that's a suggestion or something that Paul's saying here to the church, hey, here's something that I think would be a good idea. This is a commandment because of how important it is for us to forgive others if we are to advance the mission of Jesus, if we are going to further that loving community and allow that loving community of Christ, us as a church, a group of believers, to grow. That's why it's so important. That's why it's a commandment for us to forgive others the way Christ forgave us. So today, I hope that this devotion is a challenge for you guys. If there's somebody in your life that you know you need to forgive them for something that they've done against you, but there's just something that's holding you back, but you're struggling with it, I hope that this devotion is a challenge to you guys to reach out to that person and let them know that you forgive them. Because that's what Christ would want us to do, because he's forgiven us for so much more. Thank you guys for tuning in today, and we'll see you here next week for another Devo.